Nobody talks about these shrinking states. Alaska pays its residents $1,312 a year just for living there. Free money for breathing Arctic air, watching the northern lights, enjoying endless summer days. And people are still leaving. Not slowly, not reluctantly. They're running. The last frontier is hemorrhaging population faster than any state in America except one. And that exception? Hawaii, where paradise itself became so expensive that natives are being systematically exiled from their own islands. These aren't struggling Rust Belt cities or forgotten rural counties. We're talking about states that were supposed to be immune. The oil-rich, the eternally sunny, the blue-chip brands of American geography. And they're all shrinking. Not in GDP, not in headlines, in people. The one metric that actually matters, because once the humans leave, everything else is just a museum waiting to close. Nobody talks about this. The narrative is still growth, opportunity, manifest destiny. Meanwhile, 8 states are quietly bleeding population, and the reasons why reveal everything broken about how we've built modern America. Some are collapsing under their own success, others under their own failure. A few are being abandoned because nature itself is sending eviction notices, and one is so trapped in a fiscal death spiral that young people are treating it like a sinking ship. We're counting down the 8 shrinking states from steady decline to outright exodus. States where the American dream didn't just die, it packed its bags and moved to Texas. Each one represents a different way a state can fail its people. By the time we hit number 1, you'll understand why demographic collapse might be the biggest story nobody's covering. If you've ever wondered where Americans are actually moving from, not to, but from, this is your answer. Hit subscribe because you're about to see the migration data they don't show on the evening news. Drop a comment with your state. Are you watching this from a place that's growing or dying? Let's find out together. We start in the Deep South, where decline isn't a crisis, it's just Tuesday. State number 8. Mississippi, the chronic bleeder. Mississippi doesn't make headlines when it loses population because Mississippi has been losing population since 2020 and nobody expects anything different. This is the state that ranks last in almost every quality of life metric. So when the US Census Bureau reported that Mississippi lost 4,500 residents in 2023 alone, the reaction was basically a shrug. But here's what that shrug is missing. This isn't natural decline. This is systematic abandonment. The state's population peaked at 2.96 million in 2020. By mid-2024, it had dropped to 2.93 million. That's a loss of 30,000 people in 4 years, and the trend is accelerating. According to the University of Mississippi's Center for Population Studies, net domestic migration has been negative every single year since 2010. People are leaving faster than babies are being born. The median age is creeping upward, now 38.2 years, because the youngest and most educated residents are the first ones out the door. Jackson, the state capital, tells the whole story. The city lost 6.7% of its population between 2020 and 2023, according to census estimates. That's not white flight or suburban sprawl. That's economic refugees. When your capital city can't keep its water system functional, Jackson had no running water for weeks in 2022. You're not competing for new residents. You're just trying to convince the current ones to stay. The capital city's downtown restaurants close at 8 p.m. on weeknights. Not because they're empty, though they are, but because that's just how Mississippi rolls. Your dinner options after 9 p.m., gas station nachos or acceptance. The brain drain is surgical. Mississippi State University graduates about 5,000 students a year. According to the Mississippi Institutions of Higher Learning, fewer than 40% of those graduates stay in state for their first job. They're educated in Mississippi, subsidized by Mississippi taxpayers, and they're leaving for Atlanta, Dallas, Nashville, anywhere with an economy that isn't anchored to catfish farms and casinos. The state spends approximately $8,000 per student per year in higher education funding. Do the math on that return on investment. Zillow data shows the median home value in Mississippi is $180,000, the second lowest in the nation. You'd think that would attract people. It doesn't, because affordability means nothing when there are no jobs to afford it with. The state's unemployment rate sits at 3.8%, which sounds fine until you realize that's only counting people still looking for work. Labor force workforce participation is 55.1%, well below the national average of 63.4%. Translation: a massive chunk of working-age adults have simply given up. Here's the fundamental disconnect. Mississippi keeps trying to solve an economic problem with cultural messaging. Visit Mississippi campaigns and tourism boards aren't going to reverse population decline when your median household income is $52,985, dead last in the nation according to the U.S. Census Bureau's 2023 American Community Survey. Young people aren't leaving because they don't love sweet tea and hospitality. They're leaving because they can't build a life on $52,000 a year in a state with crumbling infrastructure and failing schools. One local demographer told us off the record, "We're not losing population to catastrophe. We're losing it to rational decision making." And that might be the most damning assessment of all. When staying is the irrational choice, you're not in a slump. You're in a managed decline that nobody's managing. Mississippi is the baseline, the chronic bleeder, the state where population loss is so expected it doesn't even register as news anymore. And if you think this is bad, wait until you see what happens when natural disasters join the exodus. State number 7, Louisiana, the climate refugee generator. From Mississippi, we drive west into Louisiana, where population decline has an accelerator pedal called Category 4 hurricanes. Louisiana isn't just losing people to economic opportunity elsewhere. It's generating climate refugees from its own coastline, and the insurance industry is making sure they can't come back. Louisiana's population dropped by 14,000 people in 2023, continuing a decline that started in 2021, according to census estimates. The state now sits at approximately 4.59 million residents, down from its 2020 peak of 4.66 million. That's a loss of 70,000 people in just 4 years. But the raw numbers don't capture the violence of it. This is a state being systematically abandoned by the people who built their lives on its coast. The southeastern parishes are collapsing. Plaquemines Parish lost 8.2% of its population since 2020. Terrebonne Parish down 5.4%. St. Bernard Parish down 4.1%. These aren't gradual shifts, these are evacuation level losses. According to the Louisiana Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority, the state loses a football field of land every 100 minutes to coastal erosion. When your actual geography is disappearing into the Gulf of Mexico, population decline isn't a policy failure, it's physics. Hurricane Ida hit in 2021 with 150 miles per hour winds. Hurricane Francine in 2024. Laura and Delta before that. Each storm doesn't just damage homes, it triggers an insurance apocalypse that makes rebuilding impossible. State Farm pulled out of Louisiana's homeowners market entirely in 2023. Allstate stopped writing new policies. According to the Louisiana Department of Insurance, homeowners insurance rates increased by an average of 23% in 2023 alone, and that's only for people who can still get coverage. Louisiana Citizens, the insurer of last resort, now covers over 100,000 policies because private insurers won't touch coastal properties. Louisiana Summer Heat doesn't visit. It moves in, pays rent, and occasionally sends your air conditioner to the emergency room. You'll spend more on cooling costs than some northern states spend on heating, and the humidity makes you feel like you're breathing through a wet towel. Your HVAC system will demand hazard pay. Here's what that means in practice. You buy a home for $280,000 in Houma. Hurricane hits. You file a claim. Insurance pays out maybe 60% after arguing about wind versus water damage. You rebuild. Insurance cancels your policy. Now you're paying $8,000 a year for Citizens coverage on a house that's worth less than what you owe because Zillow comps are tanking from all the other people trying to sell. Your neighbor lists their house for $240,000. It sits for 287 days, no offers. This isn't a housing market, it's a hostage situation. Even New Orleans, the cultural crown jewel, is hemorrhaging residents. The city's population is now around 383,000 according to 2024 estimates, still below its pre-Katrina level of 484,000 in 2000. That's nearly 20 years of decline. The recovery never happened. What happened instead was gentrification in a few tourist-friendly neighborhoods while entire wards emptied out. The lower 9th Ward, which had 14,000 residents before Katrina, now has fewer than 3,000. Those aren't just statistics. Those are neighborhoods that functionally ceased to exist. The economic engine isn't helping. Louisiana's economy runs on oil, gas, petrochemicals, and tourism. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the state's energy sector employment dropped 12% between 2014 and 2023 as companies automated automated and consolidated. The ports are still busy, but port jobs don't employ the tens of thousands they used to. Meanwhile, the state's cost of living increased 18% since 2020, according to the Missouri Economic Research and Information Center, while median household income crawled up only 9% to $57,206. You're getting poorer while your house literally sinks into the swamp. A Tulane University study found that 60% of Louisiana college graduates leave the state within 5 years of earning their degree. They're not leaving because they don't love beignets and Mardi Gras. They're leaving because staying means betting your financial future on a state that's quite literally losing ground beneath your feet. When the land itself is disappearing and insurance companies are fleeing faster than residents, you're not experiencing population decline. You're experiencing managed retreat, and nobody's managing it. And if you think climate-driven exodus is bad, wait until we get to the state where policy drove out more residents than any natural disaster ever could. State number 6, New York, the tax exodus poster child. From the drowning coast of Louisiana, we head north to New York, where the exodus isn't driven by hurricanes or rising seas. It's driven by tax forms and cost of living calculators. New York lost more residents than any other state in America between 2020 and 2023, a staggering net loss of over 600,000 people, according to US Census data. That's the population of entire cities just vanishing into Florida and Texas. The narrative loves to blame the pandemic, remote work, and people fleeing dense cities. That's part of it. But the migration started long before 2020. New York has experienced net negative domestic migration every single year since 2010, according to Empire Center analysis. The state's population peaked at 19.8 million in 2019. By 2024, it's down to approximately 19.5 million. You don't lose 300,000 people because of one bad year. You lose them because the value proposition broke. Here's the math that's driving people out. The Tax Foundation ranks New York 49th in tax burden. Only California is worse. State income tax tops out at 10.9%. New York City adds another 3.876% on top of that. Property taxes average $4,300 annually statewide, according to ATTOM data. But in suburbs like Westchester and Nassau counties, they routinely exceed $15,000 per year. A household earning $150,000 in Westchester is paying approximately $28,000 in combined state, local, and property taxes. That same household in Florida, zero state income tax. In Texas, same deal. The IRS releases state-to-state migration data based on tax returns, and it's devastating for New York. In 2022 alone, New York lost a net 160,000 tax filers to other states, representing over $25 billion in adjusted gross income, according to IRS statistics of income data. That's not just people leaving, that's wealth evacuating. The tax base is eroding from the top down. High earners who can work remotely are the first ones out, which means the remaining taxpayers are holding an increasingly expensive bag. Upstate New York is a different horror entirely. Buffalo lost 3.6% of its population since 2020. Rochester down 2.8%. Syracuse down 4.1% according to census estimates. These cities aren't competing with Florida for retirees. They're competing with themselves for survival. Median home values in Buffalo sit at $225,000 according to Zillow, but houses aren't selling because nobody's moving there. Days on market average 47 days, which sounds normal until you realize that's for a buyer's market in a shrinking region. The only people buying are the people who can't afford to leave. The SUNY system graduates approximately 90,000 students per year across all campuses. According to a SUNY analysis, roughly half leave New York within 5 years of graduation. The state subsidizes their education, then watches them take those degrees to Nashville, Charlotte, Austin, Denver, anywhere the rent on a one-bedroom apartment isn't $2,400 a month. In New York City, Rent Cafe data shows the average one-bedroom rent hit $3,950 in Manhattan and $2,850 in Brooklyn as of late 2024. You can rent a 3-bedroom house in Dallas for that. Here's where it gets existential. New York's remaining population is aging rapidly. The median age increased from from 38.2 in 2010 to 39.5 in 2024, according to census estimates. The state is simultaneously losing young workers and gaining retirees, which means the tax base is shrinking while the demand for services is increasing. It's a fiscal doom loop, and the state's response has been to raise taxes further, which accelerates the exodus. One financial advisor in Westchester told us off the record, "I've had 3 clients this year ask me to calculate their tax savings from moving to Florida. Not if they should move, just how much they'll save. The decision is already made. When your value proposition is pay more, get less, you're not retaining talent, you're mining it until it's gone." At least Louisiana had hurricanes to blame. New York built its own disaster with tax policy and cost disease. And if you think taxes are driving people out of New York, wait until you see the state where success itself became the reason to leave. State number 5, California, the dream that priced itself out. At least New York had the decency to blame taxes. California managed to price out the middle class with perfect weather and a functioning power grid. Well, mostly functioning. The American dream didn't die from external forces in California. It committed suicide by real estate prices. For the first time in its recorded history, California experienced sustained population decline starting in 2020, losing approximately 500,000 residents between 2020 and 2023, according to California Department of Finance data. The Golden State is tarnishing, and the people who built it can no longer afford to live there. California's population peaked at 39.5 million in 2019. By 2024, it's down to roughly 38.9 million. That sounds like a small percentage, but in raw numbers, it's catastrophic. This is the equivalent of San Francisco and Oakland combined just vanishing. And if you thought New York's taxes were driving people out, California said, "Hold my overpriced kombucha," and decided to price out the entire middle class through real estate alone. Unlike New York's tax-driven flight, California's exodus is a class purge. The middle class is being systematically priced out, while tech wealth concentrates at the top, creating a state of billionaires and service workers with nobody in between. The median home price in California hit $834,000 in late 2024, according to the California Association of Realtors. Let that sink in, the median. Half of all homes cost more than that. In the Bay Area, it's over $1.4 million. In Orange County, $1.2 million. Even in Fresno, the median home price is $412,000. A household needs to earn approximately $200,000 annually to afford the median California home using standard lending ratios. According to census data, California's median household income is $91,905. The math doesn't math. Here's what that disconnect creates. U-Haul's annual migration report consistently ranks California as the #1 state for outbound moves. In 2023, U-Haul one-way rentals leaving California outnumbered those arriving by nearly 2 to 1. It's cheaper to rent a truck from LA to Dallas than Dallas to LA because so many trucks are already making that westbound journey empty. The market for leaving is so robust that moving companies price gouge in reverse. The IRS migration data tells you who's leaving. California lost a net $29.1 billion in adjusted gross income to other states in 2022, according to IRS statistics of income. That's not retirees cashing out. That's working age earners taking their tax base to Nevada, Texas, Arizona, Washington, states where a $150,000 salary means wealth instead of barely scraping by. A Stanford study found that California has lost over 250,000 residents earning over $200,000 annually since 2018. The tax base is evaporating. Los Angeles County alone lost 90,000 residents in 2023, according to county estimates. San Francisco's population is down nearly 8% since 2020 to approximately 808,000 residents. These aren't suburbs sprawling outward. These are people leaving the state entirely. San Francisco's office vacancy rate hit 36.7% in late 2024, according to CBRE data, the highest in the nation. You can't blame that on remote work when other cities recovered. People aren't working remotely from San Francisco, they're working remotely from Boise. A decent one-bedroom in San Francisco costs $3,000 a month, according to Zillow. That's $36,000 a year just to exist in 600 square feet. You could lease a BMW, a Lexus, and still have money left over for that Whole Foods kombucha. Instead, you get a radiator radiator that clanks, a landlord who thinks repairs are suggestions, and a view of a tent encampment from your window. The University of California system graduates approximately 120,000 students annually. According to UC research, about 35% leave California within 3 years of graduation. The state spends roughly $11,000 per student in higher education funding. UC Berkeley educates a software engineer. California taxpayers subsidize it, and that engineer moves to Austin, where a 2-bedroom apartment costs $1,600 instead of $3,400. The return on investment is being exported. Here's the cruelest irony: California has more homeless residents than any state in America. Over 181,000 as of the 2024 CHUD point-in-time count, representing 28% of the nation's entire homeless population. The state has so much wealth that San Francisco's billionaires could theoretically house every homeless person in the city with their annual investment gains. Instead, median rent for a 1-bedroom apartment in SF is $3,000 according to Zillow, and tent cities line the highways. This isn't a housing crisis, it's a societal admission that affordability lost. A realtor in Sacramento told us, "I sell houses to tech workers relocating from the Bay Area and people cashing out to leave the state. Both think they're getting a deal, one's trading down in California." State number 4, Illinois, the pension death spiral. From California's affordability apocalypse, we head to the Midwest, where Illinois is experiencing a different kind of collapse: the fiscal death spiral. Illinois lost over 150,000 residents between 2020 and 2024, according to census estimates, dropping from 12.8 million to approximately 12.55 million. But the raw population loss is just a symptom. The disease is a pension system so catastrophically underfunded that the state is functionally insolvent, and young people are treating it like a sinking ship. Illinois has $211 billion in unfunded pension liabilities, according to the Commission on Government Forecasting and Accountability's 2024 report. That's not total pension obligations. That's the gap between what's owed and what's actually funded. The state's pension systems are roughly 42% funded, meaning for every dollar Illinois promises to retired teachers, 42 cents police, and state workers, it has 42 cents. The remaining 58 cents has to come from somewhere, and that somewhere is current taxpayers, a shrinking pool of them. Here's what that means in practice. Illinois spends approximately 25% of its general fund revenue on pension obligations according to the Illinois Policy Institute. Not on schools, roads, or services, on pension payments to people who no longer work. The state constitution prohibits reducing pension benefits, so those costs are locked in and growing. Meanwhile, the tax base required to pay for it is fleeing. It's a doom loop with a constitutional amendment preventing the exit. Cook County, home to Chicago, lost 68,000 residents in 2023 alone, according to county estimates. Chicago's population is down to approximately 2.67 million, a decline of nearly 100,000 since 2020. The city is now smaller than it was in 1990, but Chicago isn't just losing population randomly, it's losing taxpayers. According to IRS data, Illinois lost $9.8 billion in adjusted gross income to other states in 2022, with the majority coming from high-earning Cook County residents. When your richest residents leave, your fiscal crisis becomes a death spiral. Property taxes are weaponized to cover the gap. The median property tax bill in Oak Park is $11,200 annually. That's a used Honda Civic every single year just for the privilege of owning your house. Except the Civic might actually hold its value better than your property will. The Tax Foundation ranks Illinois 8th highest in property tax burden nationally. The median property tax bill in Cook County is approximately $5,500 annually, according to the Cook County assessor, but in suburbs like Naperville and Schaumburg, it routinely exceeds $10,000. You're not paying for better services, you're paying for promises made to retirees before you were born. One homeowner in Oak Park described it as renting from the state pension fund with extra steps. The migration pattern is surgical. Young, educated workers arrive in Chicago for entry-level jobs in finance, consulting, or tech. They stay 3 to 5 years. Then they move to Dallas, Nashville, Denver, or Austin. According to Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce research, the city has the highest churn rate of young professionals in any major metro. They're using Chicago as a resume builder, then leaving before they hit peak earning years. The city is training its own tax base for export. Downstate Illinois is a different tragedy. Cities like Peoria lost 4.1% of their population since 2020. Decatur down 5.3%. Springfield, the state capital, down 2.8% according to census estimates. These aren't suburbs losing residents to exurbs. These are entire regions being abandoned. Median home values in Decatur sit at $98,000 according to Zillow. Houses aren't selling because nobody's moving to central Illinois to pay for Chicago's pension crisis. The University of Illinois system graduates roughly 24,000 students annually. According to university research, approximately 48% leave Illinois within 5 years of graduation. The state subsidizes their education at around $8,200 per student annually in state funding, then watches them take those degrees to states without fiscal catastrophe. Illinois is an educational charity for Florida and Texas. A CPA in Naperville told us off the record, "I've stopped giving retirement advice for Illinois residents. I just show them the pension math, watch them go pale, and hand them brochures for Tennessee. That's not financial consulting, that's hospice care for tax bases." Here's the existential problem. Illinois can't cut pensions, constitutional protection, can't meaningfully cut services already near the bone, and can't raise taxes much more without accelerating the exodus. The state's credit rating is the lowest in the nation, one notch above junk status according to Moody's. Borrowing costs are enormous. The only variable left is population, and population is voting with its feet. At least California had sunshine and culture to justify the cost. Illinois has brutal winters and a pension bomb, and if you think that's bad, wait until you see the state where the economy died and nothing replaced it. State number 3, West Virginia, the post-industrial ghost. From Illinois' fiscal implosion, we drive into Appalachia, where West Virginia represents the purest form of economic collapse. The state has lost population every single year since 2012 according to census data, dropping from 1.855 million in 2012 to approximately 1.77 million in 2024. That's a loss of 85,000 people in 12 years, and the bleeding is accelerating. West Virginia isn't shrinking because of policy or taxes or climate. It's shrinking because the economy died and no one bothered to resuscitate it. Coal built West Virginia. Coal employed 130,000 miners at its 1950s peak. By 2024, that number is under 11,000 according to the West Virginia Coal Association. The mines that remain are heavily automated, producing more coal with 90% fewer workers. The promise was always that coal jobs would come back, that the old economy would return. It's not coming back. The old economy is being preserved in museums, while the actual humans leave for states with actual jobs. McDowell County tells the whole story. Once the heart of West Virginia coal country, the county's population peaked at 100,000 in 1950. By 2024, it's down to approximately 18,500 according to census estimates, an 81% decline over 7 decades. Entire towns exist as shells. Welch, the county seat, has a population under 2,000. Streetlights illuminate empty storefronts. The median home value in McDowell County is $45,000 according to Zillow. Houses aren't selling because there's no one left to sell to. The demographic collapse is multi-generational. West Virginia has the oldest median age in America at 43.1 years according to census data. The state isn't just losing young people, it lost them decades ago. What remains is an aging population with no replacement generation coming behind them. According to West Virginia University's Bureau of Business and Economic Research, the state's deaths exceed births by approximately 6,000 annually. The population is declining through attrition, and migration loss accelerates it. Marshall University graduates about 2,000 students per year. West Virginia University graduates roughly 5,500. According to WVU's analysis, approximately 55% of college graduates leave the state within 3 years. The state subsidizes their education at around $6,800 per student in state funding, then exports them to Virginia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, anywhere with white-collar jobs that aren't in healthcare or government. The two growth industries in West Virginia are nursing homes and public assistance. The infrastructure is collapsing alongside the population. According to the American Society of Civil Engineers, West Virginia ranks among the worst states for infrastructure quality. Roads are crumbling, bridges are structurally deficient, and water systems are failing in rural counties. When your population shrinks, your tax base shrinks, which means you can't maintain infrastructure, which makes people leave faster. It's a death spiral without a bottom. Charleston, the state capital, lost 8.4% of its population since 2020, dropping to approximately 47,000 residents according to city estimates. The downtown has multiple blocks of empty storefronts. Office vacancy rates exceed 20% according to commercial real estate data. You can't blame remote work when there were no office workers to begin with. This is what deindustrialization looks like 3 generations later. A capital city that can't sustain its own downtown. Median household income in West Virginia is $54,329 according to census data, 3rd lowest in the nation, but that average is deceptive because it includes retirees on fixed incomes and disability recipients. For working age households, many counties have median incomes below $40,000. You can't build a tax base on poverty wages and Social Security checks. When the Bureau of Labor Statistics reports West Virginia's labor force participation rate at 53.8%, the lowest in America, that's not a tight labor market, that's economic abandonment. Here's the cruelest part. West Virginia is beautiful. The mountains, the rivers, the small town culture that everyone romanticizes. Tourism boards sell wild and wonderful, but you can't eat scenery. You can't raise a family on nostalgia for coal mining your grandfather did. A teacher in Morgantown told us, "My students know they're leaving before they graduate high school. They're not asking if, they're asking where." When your state's primary export is educated youth, you're not experiencing a recession, you're experiencing extinction. And if you think watching a coal state die is tragic, wait until you see what happens when paradise itself becomes a form of economic exile. State number 2, Hawaii. Paradise lost to economics. From West Virginia's post-industrial collapse, we fly across the Pacific to Hawaii, where the exodus isn't driven by lack of opportunity, it's driven by the obscene cost of paradise. Hawaii lost approximately 25,000 residents between 2020 and 2024, according to census estimates, dropping from 1.455 million to roughly 1.43 million, but the raw numbers hide the violence of it. This is native Hawaiians being systematically priced out of their own homeland, replaced by wealthy mainlanders and foreign investors treating the islands like a luxury asset class. The median home price in Hawaii is $835,000 according to the Hawaii Association of Realtors, the highest in the nation. On Oahu, it's $975,000. On Maui, $1.2 million. But unlike California, where tech salaries justify some of the insanity, Hawaii's economy runs on tourism and military spending. The median household income is $88,005 according to census data. You need to earn approximately $200,000 to afford the median home. The math doesn't work unless you're inheriting property or paying cash from mainland equity. Here's what that creates. Native Hawaiians represent roughly 22% of the state's population, down from over 50% in 1970, according to demographic research. They're not leaving because they want to. They're leaving because staying means living 6 people to a 2-bedroom apartment while watching tech execs from San Francisco buy beach houses as third properties. According to University of Hawaii research, over 60% of recent immigrants identify as Native Hawaiian or Pacific Islander. The cultural erasure isn't metaphorical, it's demographic. The cost of living in Hawaii is 84% above the national average, according to the Missouri Economic Research and Information Center. Milk costs $8 a gallon. Gas averages $4.80. A modest dinner for 2 at a non-touristy restaurant runs $80. Shipping costs add 20 to 30% to everything because nearly all consumer goods are imported. You can't offset that with local wages when your job options are hotel worker, $36,000 annually, retail, $32,000, or military, $55,000 base pay. The upper middle class doesn't exist unless you're a military officer or hospital administrator. Las Vegas has become the unofficial 9th island. Over 50,000 Hawaii natives now live in the Las Vegas metro area according to community estimates. Enough that there are Hawaiian grocery stores, churches, and cultural centers. They're called the 9th Island, not ironically, but as documentation of exile. These aren't people chasing opportunity. These are climate refugees from their own economy. A 2-bedroom apartment in Las Vegas costs $1,400. The same apartment in Honolulu costs $2,800 according to Rent Cafe data. The housing crisis is weaponized by short-term rentals. According to a 2024 analysis by the Hawaii Appleseed Center for Law and Economic Justice, there are over 20 25,000 short-term vacation rentals operating across the islands. Those are 25,000 housing units removed from the local market, converted to tourist income generators. Maui County has more Airbnbs than long-term rental units in some zip codes. When your housing stock is optimized for tourists instead of residents, you're not a state, you're a resort. The University of Hawaii graduates approximately 8,000 students annually. According to university retention studies, roughly 50% leave the state within 5 years of graduation. The state subsidizes their education, then exports them to California, Washington, Nevada, anywhere they can afford to build an adult life. One UH graduate described it as getting educated in paradise, then leaving paradise because you got educated. The military presence creates its own distortion. Joint Base Pearl Harbor Hickam, Marine Corps Base Hawaii, and Schofield Barracks employ tens of thousands, but military personnel rotate out after 3 to 4 years. They're not permanent residents building long-term communities. They're transients with housing allowances that drive up rents for everyone else. According to local housing advocates, military BAH, Basic Allowance for Housing, rates effectively set rental price floors that civilians can't compete with. State number 1. Alaska, the last frontier nobody wants. We end where we started. Alaska, the state that pays its residents to live there, and they're leaving anyway. Alaska lost over 15,000 residents between 2020 and 2024, according to census estimates, dropping from 733,000 to approximately 718,000. The last frontier has the second fastest population decline rate in America, behind only Hawaii, and unlike every other state on this list, Alaska has a cheat code. The Permanent Fund Dividend, an annual payment to every resident funded by Oil Wealth. In 2024, that check was $1,312 per person, free money just for existing, and people are still fleeing. The Alaska Permanent Fund is worth $78 billion. Built from oil royalties over 5 decades, every Alaskan resident who's lived in the state for a full calendar year gets a dividend payment. A family of 4 received $5,248 in 2024. That's not stimulus, that's annual recurring income for being Alaskan. No other state offers anything close. And yet net migration has been negative almost every year since 2014, according to Alaska Department of Labor data. When you're bribing people to stay and they're still leaving, you're not offering a bad deal, you're offering an impossible life. Here's why the bribe isn't working. Alaska's cost of living is 28% above the national average, according to the Missouri Economic Research and Information Center. Anchorage, the largest city with 286,000 residents, has a median home price of $425,000, according to Zillow. Not outrageous compared to California or Hawaii, but devastating when you factor in everything else. Heating costs average $3,200 annually because winter temperatures hit minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Groceries cost 30 to 50% more than the lower 48 because everything is shipped or flown in. A gallon of milk in rural Alaska can cost $12. Your PFD check disappears into survival costs before you notice it arrived. The isolation is existential. Over 80% of Alaska is inaccessible by road. Communities like Nome, Bethel, and Barrow are fly-in only. Round-trip tickets to Seattle from Anchorage routinely exceed $600. If you need specialized medical care, you're flying to Seattle or Portland because Alaska doesn't have the population density to support advanced healthcare infrastructure. According to Alaska's Department of Health, the state has 2.9 physicians per 1,000 residents, well below the national average of 3.6. When the nearest MRI machine is a $1,200 flight away, you're not living in a state, you're living in an outpost. The economy is brutally narrow. Alaska's GDP is 85% dependent on oil, gas, mining, tourism, and federal spending, according to state economic data. When oil prices crashed in 2014, Alaska entered a recession that lasted 6 years. The state slashed budgets, cut the PFD payment from over $2,000 to $1,000, and watched residents flee. By the time oil prices recovered, the migration pattern was established. Young workers learned Alaska's prosperity is dependent on commodities they can't control, and they're not betting their lives on volatile barrels. Anchorage lost 3.1% of its population since 2020. Fairbanks, the second largest city, down 4.2%. Juneau, the capital, down 2.8% according to census estimates. These aren't small towns withering. These are Alaska's major population population centers shrinking. The University of Alaska system graduates approximately 3,400 students annually. According to university research, over 60% leave the state within 3 years. Alaska subsidizes their education at roughly $9,100 per student in state funding, then watches them take those degrees to Seattle, Denver, or Portland, places where winter doesn't last 8 months and groceries don't cost a mortgage payment. Here's the demographic crisis. Alaska's median age is 35.4 years, younger than most states because of the military presence. But when you exclude military personnel, who rotate out every few years, the resident population is aging rapidly. Deaths are starting to exceed births in some rural boroughs. The state is losing young families while retaining retirees who can't afford to leave. The PFD becomes a subsidy for staying put, not for building a future. The climate paradox is the cruelest joke of all. Climate change is making Alaska more habitable. Longer growing seasons, milder winters, less permafrost. Scientists project Alaska could be one of the few climate winners this century. The state is becoming objectively better to live in from a weather perspective, and people are still leaving. When paradise is getting warmer and you're still running, the problem isn't climate, it's everything else. One Anchorage realtor told us, "I sell houses to people rotating in for jobs and people cashing out to leave. Nobody's moving here to build a multi-generational life. Alaska is a chapter, not a book. When your state has evolved into a temporary assignment that pays a bonus, you're not a frontier. You're a corporate relocation with mountains." Alaska represents the ultimate failure of the American growth model. You can have natural resources, budget surpluses, literal cash payments, and still lose population because isolation, cost, and economic volatility make staying irrational. The frontier closed because nobody wants to live on it anymore, even when it pays you to try. And that brings us full circle. From Alaska paying people to stay, to Hawaii exiling its own, to West Virginia bleeding out, to Illinois trapped in fiscal doom, to California pricing out the middle class, to New York taxing away its future, to Louisiana drowning, to Mississippi just existing in managed decline. These 8 states aren't outliers, they're warning signs. They represent what happens when affordability collapses, when climate becomes uninsurable, when tax policy drives exodus, when economic models die, when fiscal obligations consume the future, when paradise becomes unaffordable, when success prices out citizens, and when bribes can't overcome reality. Population decline isn't a bug in the American system. It's a feature of systems that prioritize wealth extraction over human sustainability. 8 states, 8 different ways to fail. Mississippi bleeds slowly because nobody expects anything better. Louisiana generates climate refugees while insurance companies flee. New York exports wealth to avoid its own tax burden. California prices out the middle class while building tent cities. Illinois traps residents in a pension death spiral. West Virginia watches its young people leave because coal jobs aren't coming back. Hawaii exiles natives from their own paradise. Alaska bribes people to stay, and they're still running. The pattern is clear. States are failing their residents through different mechanisms, but the outcome is identical. People vote with their feet. The American migration story is no longer about opportunity. It's about escape. The states gaining population, Texas, Florida, North Carolina, aren't winning because they're better. They're winning because they're not these 8. And the people left behind, the elderly, the poor, the trapped. When your state's best export is educated 25-year-olds, you're not competing, you're dying. Hit subscribe. We're covering the states that are growing next and why they're not as great as the marketing suggests. Drop a comment with your state, staying or leaving. The map is changing. Act accordingly.